Northeastern type of a thing. Most of the games started up there. There was, rounders and town ball, and we'll get into some of that if we have time. But in getting this assignment, we were asked to put this together. Me and Eric Safewalk, another team member of ours, and we started doing some research on it. We went to the local museums. We went here, we went there. One of the places was the Osceola County Museums. They had great stuff going on there. It was very nice. And we started to research it. And I didn't realize it, because we all know the great names. We remember Babe Ruth. My dad told me stories about it. He saw Duke Snyder, he saw the great names, and he told me about DiMaggio. And he gave me all these great stories, but it was all the 10s, the 20s, 30s, 1900s. And we didn't really as a kid, you didn't really, get into what happened prior. You just didn't think about it. We were all locked up with our own thing. Like I said, New York Mets, new team, holy cow. They got Dodger blue and they got Giant orange. What's better than that, right? So it was all very exciting and all that. But I also had heard, I kind of was a little amateur Civil War historian, and you heard talk about games, between the regiments and that kind of stuff in the battlefields, and you're like, wow, man, that's interesting. But it really wasn't depicted that much. If you look at history, it's very rarely did you actually find out about it. So we started doing the research, Eric and I. Eric was actually asked to do this. He had to be out of town, so we collaborated on putting this thing together. And it just impressed the hell out of me of what went on. The camaraderie that took place in the ranks of the Civil War soldiers. Now, the average Civil War soldier, they would have these huge, monstrous battles for 2 or 3 days, and then they have 2 months of just walking around, going here, and campings here, and all that stuff. And what they did is play baseball. We heard all the stories and all the movies, and they were, playing music, and they were playing cards, and getting drunk. But mostly they played baseball, which was amazing to me. I didn't realize it was that prolific. I thought it was, a minor occurrence and stuff like that. No, it was a major thing. So anyway, I just put together some notes here. I'll go through some of the stuff, and I'll show you some pictures that we had. But this picture is from a book that was put out by Doubleday, who was not the father of baseball. It was Chadwick. We'll get into that a little bit. But this gives you an idea. In 1911, this book came out. It was Doubleday was the publisher, or he was a collaborator on it. But it shows you what they thought was the origins. And you can see where this is, and there's 2 things depicted. One is regiments playing each other. Now, of course, the North won, so they got the northern flag here, all right? But you could have made the same picture with the stars and bars. It's very similar. But if you look up here, you'll see the top is 2 regiments playing each other. That is, Regiment A, Regiment B against each other from the same side. The bottom is a prison yard. Because even in the prisons back then in the Civil War, they played ball. Sometimes it's the prisoners against the guards. It was amazing. I don't know. Anyway, I just thought that was astounding, that kind of a thing could happen, and that we could have that kind of camaraderie going on. So I just did a little research. Me and Eric did a little research, and it just was kind of a little surprising to me how much it was. And these are just a couple of quotes. And again, we don't have time to go through the whole thing, but in this one book by John Bowman and Joel Zoss, quote, "As part of the fabric of American culture, baseball is common social ground between strangers, a world of possibilities and of chance, where it's never over till it's over." I thought Yogi Berra said it's not over till it's over. That was it was 100 years before his time. They had that type of a thing. And honestly, I guess back then you didn't have the internet, you didn't have television, you didn't have anything. It was all stories. So every game became greater than it was. Anyway, one of the simplest and best explanations of the game's impact in society was penned by Charles Peverelli, who wrote a lot of stuff. Anyway, and again, this is from the 1860s. The game of baseball has now become beyond question a leading feature of outdoor sports in the United States. It's a game which is particularly suited to the American temperament and disposition. In short, the pastime suits the people, and the people suit the pastime. And during the war, of course, and even natural disaster and things like that, or in the midst of economic hardship, the game has always provided an emotional escape for people from every race, religion, background, who can collectively find a place to play. And again, like I said, when you did that little background thing, that movie Sandlot, I played on the Sandlot. The same thing. The dirt, the lousy field, all the players were different. We had all that, all that kind of stuff going on. But it was surprising to find that over 140 years ago, it was the same thing. So somehow back in the day, that whole thing was taken, was a very, very important thing. And again, as it was mostly a northern type of a thing, it started to spread mostly through the war. Because now all through the country, you had these forces coming here, and they're going here, and they're going through Atlanta, they're going all the way down to New Orleans, and they started to play. One of the things I also found out was that there were times when the Confederates and the Union soldiers would play against each other. And a couple of Union soldiers, there's one story, Grant was kind of pissed off about that, fraternizing with the enemy kind of stuff. And these soldiers they just said, you know what, we're just going to sneak over the hill. And let's hope that Grant doesn't find us, because if he finds us, we're going to get in trouble. But they did it anyway. It was very interesting, very interesting. But it's also kind of logical. And again, these are quoting from this historian. The mass concentration of young men in army camps and prisons, believe it or not, it's an important thing, eventually converted the sport formerly reserved for gentlemen into a recreational pastime that can be enjoyed by people from all backgrounds. So that's kind of when it became the people's sport, I suppose, is, people who have nothing to do, they're going to die for their country or whatever, they still found time to do that. Union and Confederate soldiers endorsed baseball as a much-needed morale builder, provided both mental and physical conditioning. If the long details of camp, it eased the boredom and created team spirit among the men. Some soldiers actually took baseball equipment to war with them. When proper equipment was not available, they did what we all did even when we were kids. They took sticks, posts, barrel staves, tree branches, bats to make bats, and yarn and red tape, even walnuts, they said, lumps of cork for balls. Didn't matter. We did that too. I know Fred, he played stickball with those stupid balls you talk about all the time. Even I'm not that old, but well, I am, but you know what I mean. And again, in the midst of battle, these are just some letters that some of the soldiers back then would write home, which a lot of history was based on. There wasn't like they didn't have reporters from the line, recording, I'm at the battle and this is going on. A lot of this research is done, and this is a private Alphonse Parker, 10th Massachusetts, northern boy, fighting down in the South. And he just wrote back, and this is the words of just a private local guy. He said, it's astonishing how indifferent a person can become to danger. The report of musketry is heard. In other words, they're in the midst of battle. They can hear the fight going on over the hill over there, not very far away. Yet over there on the other side of the road, most of the company is playing bat ball, which he called it bat ball, okay? And perhaps in less than a half an hour, they may be called to play a ball of a different game, meaning the ball from the musket. So it was going on even, that's how important it was, is the point. Because I always loved baseball. I was a crazy one, like a lot of friends of mine, a lot of us, because we're all involved with this kind of stuff. It becomes very much a part of your life. But even in a wartime, when you might be in battle in a half an hour, they still wanted to finish the game. It's just amazing. I just read these things, and I read these letters from these soldiers, and it just became apparent how actually amazing it was back in the time. And then again, this one guy goes on, and suddenly there was a scattering of fire, which 3 outfielders caught the brunt. Now they're playing a game, and the Southern soldiers came and started firing on him, which was amazing. The center fielder was hit and captured, but the left and right fielder managed to get back to our lines. The attack was repelled without serious difficulty, but we had lost not only our center fielder, but the only baseball in Alexandria, Texas. This happened to happen in Texas. So it's like, they were almost more pissed off that the game ended than that their outfielder was wounded and, carried away. So I thought that was astonishing too. But also kind of, I guess, it was good for me because I was kind of a nut job with that stuff. It was like all the baseball cards, go to the games. I lived on Long Island, New York, Yankee Stadium. We took a train all the way out from Long Island, which was an hour. Then we took a subway into the Bronx. Then we went across, and for $2 you could, get the guy out by the gate. You could just, you give him a couple of bucks and he'd let you in because you're just kids. Hey, can we get into the game? Go ahead. But we did that. And back in those days, I'm talking 12 years old. What parent lets their kid go out even in the backyard alone anymore these days? We just couldn't believe it. It was a whole different time. A whole different time. And we all heard about Doubleday. Doubleday was, he was a military guy. This guy was, a graduate of West Point. He was involved in major battles. He commanded a division of 1st Corps at Sharpsburg and Fredericksburg. I mean, Fredericksburg is one of the most famous battlefields. I've been there a couple of times. It's just astounding what happened there. And he was also at Gettysburg. So, you know, this guy was, you know, quite the guy. And everybody says he was, you know, the father of baseball. He wasn't. He was probably a more famous guy. But apparently it was Alexander Cartwright, was apparently the fellow who put together most of the rules, regulations, and all that kind of stuff like that. And he was among a group of men in New York City's financial district. Okay, of course, he had money, I guess. You know, gathering a vacant lot on 27th Street in Manhattan to play baseball. In 1845, that's before the war. That's before the war. It's amazing how far back it goes. They organized themselves into the Knickerbockers Baseball Club, and everybody's kind of heard of them. And there's some Knickerbockers names survive. I think we played them a couple of years ago in one of the tournaments, some team called the Knickerbockers. They're everywhere, right? Anyway, he was one of the guys who traveled around. He made, I guess, the general initial rules. You know, the 90 feet here, this rule here, this rule here. You know, it's that kind of stuff. And so he actually is mostly, by historians now, considered the father of baseball. We still hear about Doubleday, but apparently he's the fellow who did it. And again, Doubleday later, he was a student of the game. He organized contests. He was an organizer. He did things like that. So he definitely put a stamp on it, but he wasn't actually the founder. Actually, neither was Cartwright. He just was, you know, another guy that got in and organized them. The other thing I was surprised about is how much attendance there were at some of these games. They'd have these games, and they would have thousands of spectators. Now remember, there's no professionals. There's no National League. There's no, you know, none of this kind of stuff like that. These were just people who played for the hell of it, like we do. We're playing now for fun. Nobody gives a damn if we win or lose. Nobody even knows we're playing except us, really, if you think about it. But apparently back in that day, that also happened. And it was very much a byproduct of the military camps. That's where it all became. And then, of course, you got Group A playing Group B. And there's a lot of betting going on, things like that. He said, but mostly it was initially, you know, it started mostly with the Union side. They were the ones, because they were the Northern soldiers, and those are the ones who basically had it. But thousands of people attending these things, and it made you know, front page news in the military publications, the local publications, and, you know, basically the things back home. So the Civil War definitely had definitely helped fuel, you know, the popularity of baseball. And it wasn't until 1860 the Washington Nationals team was born. And of course, you know, now we got a Washington Nationals again. I don't know about that, but anyway. Anyway, 1861, now you're getting toward the beginning of the war. An amateur team made up of members of the 71st New York Regiment defeated the Washington Nationals Baseball Club by a score of 41-13. We've had a couple of those games, right? 41. Remember that 40? Oh man, almost died that day. I think I scored 7 runs. I calculated it was 720 yards around the bases. Like, oh, at my age, oh man. You were there. That was one of those days, man. It was hot like it's going to be today, and you know, you're running around like a lunatic, but you make it, right? So when the 71st New York later returned to the defenses of the Capitol in '62, the teams played a rematch, which the Nationals won 28-13. Unfortunately, the victory came as part because of the 71st Regiment's best athletes had been killed at Bull Run only weeks after their first game. So some of their best players. So what makes the history books? We all heard about Bull Run. But even this many years later, it's 1861, we're talking about the 71st New York Regiment defeating the Nationals. And then the Nationals came back and won, but only because we lost our best guys. But where? In the goddamn war at Bull Run, one of the most famous things. One of the largest attendances for a sporting event in the 19th century occurred on Christmas in 1862, when the 165th New York Volunteer Regiment, the Zouaves, we've all heard of them, they're a famous group. They played at Hilton Head, South Carolina. Their opponent was the team composed of men selected from other, Union regiments. A.G. Mills was one of them, who actually became president of the National League a lot later, but he was actually there at one of those initial games. According to Kirsch, and they got another historian in that book, Blue and Gray. By the way, I recommend that. I read that book; it was just the most amazing thing. All of this was, interesting, new to me. Because I grew up, with Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and all that great history. Never even thought about this stuff going on. Anyway, they said in the 19th regiment in Canada, baseball fever broke out in Falmouth encampment in early 1863 when both enlisted men and officers playing, which wouldn't always happen. Sometimes the officers wouldn't mix with the guys. That was considered, I guess, low class. I don't know what that problem was. And it's one of the first recorded things where there were bets on the game. So the bet was $60, that was a lot of money in those days, for the winning side. So the prize was $60 a side, meaning the winning team paid the losers that sum. It was a grand time, agreed to be, blah, blah. Anyway, I thought that was interesting too. And that was about the time. Now, again, according to this, again, apparently this one fellow here, this guy Kirsch, he did a lot of the research on this stuff like that. He said there was a time when several Union soldiers watched Confederate soldiers play baseball across the Rappahannock River in Fredericksburg. And if you know about Fredericksburg, that was a pretty bloody battle. There's a lot of history there. Like I said, I've been there battlefields. I'm into that, that history stuff. And to imagine that this was going on prior to one of the most bloody battles of the war was just astounding to me. And again, this guy Nicholas Young, who was with the 26th Regiment, later became president of the baseball's National League. It was just very interesting. He was there and thought that was extremely interesting. And he observed that there were many excellent players. So he's watching the enemy instead of reconnoitering, where's this? He's like, hey, that guy's pretty good over there. Hey, see what that guy? I don't know. It was just, again, that was all kind of funny to me, that you had that kind of interaction with people. Anyway, I got a couple of these. Oh, that thing's timed out, I guess. Let's see what this is here. All right.
There you go.
Right. Well, that's that cover I was talking about, but then we'll get down to. Oh, we did the page thing. Let me do one page. Don't do something. No, that's not it. Yeah. Can you see that right? Yeah. Let me make it bigger. It's got to be a little bit bigger. It's got to be a way to zoom in, right? Or maybe not.
There's a slider in the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay. Window.
Anyway, these are just a couple of photographs that went on. The first one here. It depicts Union soldiers playing, baseball with sentries guarding, from the outside, and it's just, on a hill, behind, in a ball field. But this location is not quite unknown, but it's very interesting. But the top one there was an interesting photograph. Apparently, it's the only actual known photograph of a ball game. Now, I don't know if the photographer was trying to take a picture of a ball game. It looked like he was trying to take a picture of the guys lining up in the front, but in the background, they captured a baseball game going on, which I kind of thought that was interesting that even survived. It was in 1862. So it's just amazing that we had that kind of thing. Oh man, there they are. All the bad guys are here. Oh man. All right. How you doing, guys? Welcome in. So basically now, Spalding, and we all heard about Spalding too. I mean, he made his money on baseball as well. But basically he quoted, "Modern baseball has been born out of the brain of the American soldier. It received its baptism in the bloody days of our nation's darkest hour. It had its early evolution when soldiers north and south were striving to forget their foes by cultivating through this grand game fraternal friendship and tolerance and harmony. During the war between the states, countless baseball games, originally known as town ball, were organized when army camps and the prisons of both sides of the Mason-Dixon line. Very little documentation exists regarding these games. That's why these pictures ended up being so rare. I thought it was kind of interesting. And they were, of the hundreds of pictures taken, obviously, there's only a couple. Again, this is the only one that they've been able to identify. It's an actual photograph of a baseball game in progress during the war. Now, there also, there's some background. Baseball wasn't always baseball. It was town balls, rounders. It had a large, evolution as it went on. And again, there was a Northeast, which is very much the center of the thing. Some of the initial rules came out. Some would call it the Massachusetts rules, the New York rules. They had a different type of things. But in 1858, there was actually a guide that was published somewhere from the Massachusetts Association of Ball Players. That was 1858, again, predating the war. And base tenders, that was infielders at the time, and scouts were the outfielders. They recorded outs by plugging or soaking runners, the term used to describe hitting a runner. You didn't tag someone out of the ball in those days. You hit him with it. It was a lot of fun. I don't know, I played my grandkids only day. You know, it's only one field and two fielders, me against three of them. I get to throw the ball at them. So that's the only way I can get you out. But then I did a little, you know, just do a little imagination now. The other thing was, you could run out of the baseline. So now, I ran into you at third base, I think, one of the games. In the old rules, I could have just stopped and run the other way. I'm faster than you, it's fine. And honestly, I'd run around you. You can chase them all over the place. There was no base rule. So now you got the ball, and again, you didn't have tagging to throw it. Now, if I'm from here to you, I could miss you. Now, if I miss the ball, then someone else has got to get it. Now you run, then you run after you. I mean, just think about what those games were like. And if you see some of the scores, you might get an idea of what it was all. So it was kind of interesting. And, you know, balls and strikes, you know, wasn't introduced right away. But ultimately, again, Cartwright, some others, there were some people that couldn't hit, so you figure you get them out of the way. I guess that was one of the things. And what was very interesting, and I guess we know that because we played the vintage rules and stuff like that, this game was designed to hit the ball. Today's game with the strikeouts, the home runs, there was no such thing as a home run unless you outran the ball. You got all the way around. But the concept was not there. And the idea was to hit the ball. It took 30 years after the Civil War before they allowed you to throw an overhand ball. The idea was to pitch it, like a horseshoes. The idea was to hit the ball. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that about vintage base. So I'm thinking back now, those games might have been more fun. Everybody got on base, everybody ran. You made outs on the base paths. They still had the one-hop rule, which changed, you know, a bunch of years after that. But they still had the one-hop rule. And even again, I don't know how much time we got, but even that rule evolved because, you know, they said that was manly, a hop, catching up a fly, man, be a man, you know, that kind of stuff. So that kind of stuff went on. So I kind of started as what they call town ball. And again, prisoners, POWs, they would play. There's a famous one from Salisbury Prison. I don't know if I have North Carolina. That's on the picture list. Let me see what I got. Yeah, this is an artist's rendering. Yeah, this is it here. Union Prisons in Salisbury, North Carolina. He drew this, you know, it's a drawing, obviously photography was relatively new back in the day. But this was basically Union troops playing baseball in a Confederate prison camp. So even back in the day, they allowed it to happen. A lot of times it was the guards against the prisoners. But this was, you know, this is basically from 1862. And again, you know, the prisons got really bad after that. You know, what happened to southern prisons, they didn't have food, and, you know, basically we all know about Andersonville and some of the horrors of the prison camps. But initially, this is the kind of stuff, and it sounds like fun to me. I wouldn't mind being in that prison camp, to be honest with you. Those guys probably ended up, you know, having a good time. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, again, that's just an illustration. This is Otto Buttinger. He was one of the photographers. Not photographers, the guy who wrote it. He was actually one of the prisoners. He wrote it later, basically. He came up and did this illustration, which is kind of interesting. Now, one of the prisoners here, I guess, is kind of interesting. There was a team called the New Orleans Knights. Prisoner Gray mentioned that baseball was played nearly every day, weather permitting. Claims have been made that these were the first baseball games played in the South. Basically, you know, south of the Mason-Dixon line, some of the first games. And again, the Union soldiers brought it down to a lot of the southern things, and they basically made that kind of stuff happen. And just go back, you know, back in time, again, they improvised with the equipment, they did what they had to do, you know, tree branches for branch, etc. And some of the early expressions, you know, aces was a run, behind was the catcher, Club 9 was a team, they didn't call it a team, called it Club 9. A dewdrop, that was a slow pitch. Foul tick, foul ball, hurler was the pitcher, striker was the batter, match was the game, muff was an error, tally was the score. And there's one reported here, 1864, Rochester, New York reporter states that many first-class players were engaged in a grand match against the rebellious side. Union soldiers encamped at Culpeper Courthouse in Virginia reported that General Grant does not want them having a match with General Lee's boys, but they would be willing to have a friendly match, which they did do. Many officers the officers did not participate because they were afraid they'd get in trouble. But it didn't really matter. They went out with their game, and they thought it was a fantastic, and again, I don't know, the South and the North, you're supposed to be killing each other. For the week before, you're killing each other, and then you're playing a ball game. And again, a lot of the Confederate troops ended up starting playing what they call town ball, which we modernized as the years went on. It's very interesting. And what I like mostly is that they learned early on who was a good ball player. So after it got to the point where everybody enjoyed the game, you would start getting managers, officers, whatever, and they'd start putting together their own teams. Come on, try it. And then you started getting into grudge matches between the regiments, between the things. And they ended up knowing each other. They ended up knowing what was happening. Each regiment almost was known by how good their ball team was. Again, no professionals, no money, no nothing. It's just, they wanted to be the best, and they pursued it as best as they could. It was more than a decade after the Civil War that the National League was later developed. That's basically the first professional. Same year that General George Custer was killed along with 264 Union cavalry. That's how long ago it was. Basically, that baseball organized basically to a professional type of thing. 1876, the National League of Professional Ball Teams was formed. 18th Circuit, we know most of them: Boston Red Sox, Chicago White Stockings, Cincinnati Redlegs, Hartford Dark Blues, Louisville Grays, Philadelphia Athletics, Brooklyn Mutuals, and the St. Louis Browns. That's the original teams in the National League. It had been reported that many members of the U.S. Cavalry, most of them veterans of the war, engaged in baseball games to pass the time while protecting the Western Territories, again, post-war. Some of them returned home. Witnesses like Ross Barnes of Chicago hit the first National League home run, which I didn't know. Who ever heard of Ross Barnes? It was actually recorded. Ross Barnes of Chicago hit the first National League home run, which was an inside the park version. And a Cincinnati pitcher named William Cherokee Fisher gave up the first home run. That's kind of weird, right? We didn't even remember that. It was kind of funny. Anyway, this is just a rough idea. Again, it wasn't part of a report, a battlefield report of what kind of baseball games were played. But I did a quick analysis of that, and I'll just give you a rough. There's a couple of these. 1862. Union soldiers, trainees from the 13th Massachusetts and the 51st Pennsylvania versus themselves. They fought each other. Games were played evenings on the drilling field in many training camps prior to deployment. 1862, Union, 165th New York Infantry versus the New York Regiment All-Star 9. Perhaps one of the most famous Civil War games. It was witnessed by 40,000 troops watched that game. 40,000 in 1862. There's a war going on. 1862, the Irish Brigade versus themselves, which Confederate sentries stationed across the Chickamauga River watched Union play the game during General McClellan's march to Richmond. So they were just on the hill watching the game as they were marching on Richmond. It's interesting. 1860, these are just the recorded ones that somehow survived historically. 1862, 56th New York versus the 69th New York. 1862, Union, 2nd Brigade, 2nd Division, Army of the Potomac versus selected members of the Honey Run Club team. Incoming Confederate cannon fire ended the game abruptly. Members of both the brigade and the 59 champions practiced regularly throughout the war. Confederate, 1863, 24th Alabama versus themselves. They played daily while stationed in Wake. 1863, 26th Pennsylvania, 26th Massachusetts. 1863, 13th Massachusetts. Then there's a bunch more. 1st New Jersey Artillery, Union soldiers in Alexandria, Texas played a game. 2nd New Jersey Volunteers versus the 77th New York Volunteers. 1st New York Artillery versus 10th Massachusetts Infantry. So there was great rivalry that took place between these guys, and they played an awful lot of ball. And here's a Confederate one. 11th Mississippi POWs at the Union prison camp in Sandusky. That's the picture we have up here. Basically versus themselves. And then Union and Confederate soldiers from both the Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia played a game in 1865. Following General Lee's surrender at Appomattox Courthouse, soldiers from both sides played the game. Isn't that weird? That's kind of basically the end of the war. And the first thing they did together was play a ball game. Anyway, it was very interesting. I found it interesting. And I learned a lot going through that. And I don't know if you guys are interested. I don't know. I have some of these pictures if anybody wants to pass them around or keep any of them. There's 4 each if anyone wants to grab one. I didn't know I could get the projector here, so I bought a couple of those.
Thank you very much, Steve. That was very
Well, I'm not done. That's only part 1.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Trying to rush through it. I had 2 assignments. The second one, that's basically Civil War. But then I was also asked to do this part on the history of baseball in Florida.
Oh, okay.
Which was kind of interesting for me as well. Because I'm a new Floridian. I've only been here 10 years, so I'm still learning my Florida history and all that kind of stuff as well. But basically, Florida didn't even become a state until 1845. It seems like that was just the verge of the initial point of baseball. And again, I'm not going to go through all of this, but if you're from Florida, you've heard Flagler County. Henry Flagler was the Standard Oil guy. The first railroads we talked about, Key West was until 1912. First railroad line came through in 86, 1800s. Henry planned lines hit Tampa and the West Coast. The thing about Florida at that time, it was just very rural. There was not a lot of industry. Obviously very much agriculture. And baseball was basically a leisure and physical activity that took place mostly in the north, as I had said before. But the people who were down in Florida, most of them were hardworking. They were farmers, they were cattlemen, they were doing, that kind of work. They didn't really have time to go out and play a lot of baseball. But again, after the Civil War, Confederate soldiers came back to St. Cloud, Osceola County, which is, just near Kissimmee if you're not from around here. They laid out the towns and streets, based with, Union soldiers. That was the name of a lot of the streets. And we studied some of the museums. We were trying to find what was the earliest vestiges of it. The only real thing we saw was in 1860 at a place called Shingle Creek, near Osceola. Pioneer Village was where we practiced, very close to where we practiced. Was the original home of, which is our original home thing, honestly, right there at Shingle Creek, there is a sign stating that a team from Shingle Creek, which is the Kissimmee area, played baseball throughout the state of Florida, representing the area. They took it very seriously. Anybody wants to watch this, I took a picture of the thing. It's a Civil War cemetery, and if you go in that area, it's kind of cool. You'll see a lot of the Confederate soldiers are buried there. It's just very interesting. You'll see the CSA guys. The Awkwards. Now, we're the Awkwards baseball team of Central Florida. And our team is based on an actual team that existed in the basically 1890s at that particular point. The Awkwards of City... What's that? Yes, I know. That's usually a joke we get, we're that old. It is kind of true, but let me see if I have this pic. I want to show you this picture here. It's kind of cool. I'm going to float these around too. I have a nice little collection of photographs of historic pictures of baseball. I'll pass the whole thing around, but this one here, I'll just give you this first. 1880s, this is the original Awkwards baseball team, which our team is named after. Let me just pass it around if you want. The photograph was approximately 1883 when that was taken. And we have some of the newspaper accounts that took place. And it's kind of funny. Again, Osceola County, they did a great job in historical societies. We searched a lot of the newspaper accounts and things like that. March 22, 1863, an effort is now being made to get up a baseball club at this place, which was the church at the time, the City Point Community Church. And before the summer months pass away, we expect Titusville to have the best 9 in the state. It's like an ad in the newspaper to put together a team. And then a few months later, a baseball club, 2 words baseball, has been organized at City Point with Will Black as captain. Practice up city points, and the athletes will give you a trial. That's the way they wrote in those days. And then the Awkward Baseball Club. Again, this is October. So in March they're looking to put together a team. By October 11th, the Awkward's Baseball Club have made arrangements to play a game of baseball with the Athletics at this place on next Saturday afternoon, 13th. The Athletics will give a complimentary hop at the courthouse, so I guess they have a party to go, in the evening in honor of the visiting Awkwards. A good time is sure to be had by all. And then, I found this almost like the day before I got here, 1863. And it's a newspaper article. Baseball match, it's called. About 11 o'clock on Friday, the game was commenced between the Jefferson Baseball Club from Monticello and the Tallahassee Scrub Nine. I guess they just put together a team, right? During a part of the time, the playing was quite exciting, and altogether, it did much towards adding to the amusement and relieving the monotony of the occasion, and passed off without any hard feelings on either side, which is an unusual thing for a game of baseball to do. So I thought that was hilarious. Passed off without hard feelings, which is an unusual thing to do. The following is a summary of the score as it stood at the close of the 9th inning. Jefferson Baseball Club, 9 innings, 18 runs. Tallahassee Scrub 9 innings, 9 runs. Dr. G. Hamilton acted as umpire, and his ruling was generally conceded to be fair and impartial. The Scrub 9 from Tallahassee was gotten together at an hour's notice, none of the players having practiced together, and several were really selected from a crowd after going out to the grounds. Well, they came up short players, pulled people out of the stands. And even then, their catcher did not arrive until the 2nd inning. As the 9 runs by which the Jeffersons beat were obtained on the 1st inning, it appears that the Tallahassee boys did not play such a bad game after all. That's 1883. I didn't think it was, again, 1883. I just never thought that that kind of stuff was going on that far back. And I'll go through this quickly, as time is on. But evidence of early baseball in Florida, right? There was a nice book that was put together. I have a copy of it here somewhere. But apparently Abner Doubleday was stationed at Fort Dallas on the Miami River during the Third Seminole War. It's 1855 to 58. And though he's no longer considered the inventor of baseball, he obviously, did a lot to advance the game. Florida is slow to develop compared to other parts of the U.S. because Spain and the people struggled to live off the land. Large towns were not established. The settlers had to battle Native Americans, mosquitoes, and unexpected storms, which I guess we still do. The first game was played in 1874 between Tallahassee team. They wore white shirts with blue collars, white pants, checked caps, and a rosette of scarlet and blue on their uniforms. One from the neighboring town, a member of the visiting team, hit a clear home run, but failed to touch first base when he rounded the diamond. Knowledge of the homestead was a problem. Some of the names and teams back then, the Jacksonville Boot and Shoe Baseball Club. They were clerks from a shoe store. The Boot and Shoe Baseball Club. Dixies. Dixie, you know about Dixies. Longfellows. Everybody had to be over 6 feet tall. The Mufflers. Mechanics. The Mystics. The Osceola Mutuals. Quick Steps. The Reliables. The Rubbers. I don't know what that means. The Fat Nine. This was a good one. The Fat Nine.
We should change our name.
The average weight of the player was 231 pounds. They boasted that their players weighed 2,073 pounds.
That's awesome.
The Fat Nine.
I think in Polk County, the Fat Men took a match against the Thin something or other.
The Thin something.
I forget, the Thin Men or something like that. It was one of those just comical matches.
No, it's cool. Who do
that
you
was
think of
the
that?
match back then?
That was the match.
Yeah. The Palatka team in 1894 changed its name from Never Sweat to Big Injuns after a loss of 30-0 to Jacksonville team while scoring 19 runs in 1 inning. They changed the name, they were so bad. Nobody knows. Tallahassee Garden City played Jacksonville Lees, named after Robert E. Lee, in 1874, who soon afterwards started recruiting professional baseball players. Barnstorming trips to Florida, you know, we kind of heard about that, 1880s. There was a game with 12,000 fans in Jacksonville, which saw New York play Washington. It was probably the first major league game in Florida. Again, it was like a barnstorming kind of a game, not a spring training. It was just considered. But 12,000 fans actually showed up. And in 1895, the New York Giants spent several weeks of tree training in Jacksonville. Later, the Philadelphia Athletics, Cincinnati Reds, Boston Nationals, Brooklyn Super Bras, oh, that's a typo, came to Jacksonville while encouraging other locals. Jacksonville became a chapter member of the Sally League, South Atlantic League, in 1904. Interesting. Just some early games. 1893, Jacksonville Mystics lost to Savannah Oglethorpe's, named after the founders of Savannah. They agreed to disband for a fee of a suit of clothing if they would wear the name of the local bookstore on their uniform. So basically it sold out to get a new set of clothes. Players were scored by the local newspapers being vulgar and not true sportsmen. Support motivated by a cheap advertising scheme. It was reported that the players were poor and were trying to support their families, and that's why they sold out. Women were usually the majority of fans in the stands. And in 1897, a game in Jacksonville, women were blamed for the loss because the Jacksonville Nine paid more attention to the ladies instead of playing the game. Man, some things never change, right? What the hell is that? Yeah, man. And apparently money was often raised at games back in those days. There was a baseball game, Jacksonville versus Fernanda in 1882, and they raised it for a local hospital, St. Luke's Hospital. So they would play a game, and they would take the proceeds and they would throw it on. With rampant betting going on, umpires were used quite often, treated poorly, and sometimes replaced in mid-game because they were displeased with the umpire's calls. You can fire the umpire. Get out of here. They just send him off the field. So, you know, there's a lot going on back there. The team slowly developed in the town. I don't know what time we got. What time we got?
56.
We got a couple minutes.
Yeah.
I just want to, before I run out of time, I just want to throw these, pass these around, just everybody can take a look. I did a quick thing. The earliest baseball pictures I could find in Florida from 1870. And if you go through this, you'll see it. You'll see some of the teams. You'll see some of the years. Again, which go back very far.
It's crazy.
Just want to get. There's a lot more here, but it'll be online. I think you can download this, but some of it's kind of funny.
No air conditioning either.
Now again, we're running out of time, so I just want to, Town Ball is what a lot of what this stuff was known as back then, or Philadelphia Town Ball. That was kind of what a lot of people understood it to be, but that was just based on a set of rules. Some of the rules were published. If they were published, I guess they were more credible than those that may not have been. Mostly in those days, they made up the rules. Some games, it was 1 out and in, and then they would just, keep on playing. Some of them would be 9-inning games. Some of them were 30-inning games. They were games that, nobody knew when to change. But again, the Massachusetts game, the original player had 4 bases. They were only 60 feet apart. So again, probably easier to get a hit when you got to run 60 feet instead of 90. Fielders were allowed to put out a runner by hitting a throw ball. There was no foul territory. Base runners were not required to stay within the baselines. So that got me kind of fun. And just a couple of most notable games, I'll just wrap it up. It's kind of funny. On July 28, 1859, a game at Ashland, the Medway Unions defeated the Upton Excelsiors 100 to 78 in 211 innings. Although these innings were defined by 1 out, not 3, it's still the most innings ever played in a recorded baseball game. The following year, at the Worcester Agricultural Fairgrounds, the same 2 teams played the longest game ever in the history of baseball. According to Philip Lowry, from the 2004 Baseball Research Journal, the game was scheduled to begin on September 25th, 1860. Play continued through September 26th, October 1st, until it finally was called a complete game with the score Upton 50, Medway 29. The game took a record 21 hours and 50 minutes of actual game time. They generally played each day from 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a 1 hour break for lunch. In one contemporary journalist's opinion, the time occupied in playing the game under such rules was, we think, rather too much of a good thing. But it was, to this day, the longest game. So the highest scoring game was the same two teams, again, with these two teams that played. And there's a whole bunch more in here. You know, like I said, time is pretty much done. But what I did is go through some of the rules, go through some of the things. There were Knickerbocker rules, was another set. But actually, it was Chadwick who came up with this, you know, the 90 feet between bases. He came up with most of the rules that we would say, you know, constitutes modern baseball. And all I know is, in all the time that I've been a baseball fan, I had no idea to the degree with which the game was back in the day. And again, take a look at those photographs there of the Florida teams, and you get an idea of how far back it goes and how much the rivalry was. I had another section in here, but betting was a big thing. I mean, even back then. This group would bet against that group, they would go against this group. Sometimes it was a team bet, sometimes an individual bet, but they were fans on the outside. It was just amazing. And that's why the umpires took a lot of heat. What happened was they got a bad call, people saw money coming out of their pocket. $60 a game in that one game that we were talking about, each player would, you know, walk away with like $6 or something. That was a week's pay in those days. So that's how the umpires, that's why the umpires took a lot of crap. That's why a lot of them were booted out. And some of the other articles, I got a few more articles in here and stuff, but they all had that same flavor from what I read. It was just mostly camaraderie, mostly fun. People love to watch it, and I guess the players love to play it because we're all still playing today. Anyway, any questions anyone has, let me know. But it was a good time, and I enjoyed doing the research on that. And just those photographs right there, if you get a chance to take a look at them, you'll see Florida goes back pretty far. It's kind of interesting. There's even a picture of a bunch of prisoners playing ball in there. I mean, convict prisoners, not war prisoners.
When did you decide to shave the mustache off? I noticed the Awkwoods picture